Since April, this is where Robert McLaughlin has been preaching, a former Weintraub's building in Somerset that his church converted. We tried to talk to McLaughlin here. First we were told he wasn't in, then that he was, but was advised by his lawyer not to talk to us. We waited across the street, only to be videotaped by McLaughlin's son, Ryan. McLaughlin's roots are in The Bible Speaks in the mid-70s, a ministry headquartered in Lenox, Massachusetts. He was ordained by its leader, Carl Stevens. McLaughlin lived at the Rhode Island branch in Johnston in the former Swampwater Motel along Route 6. From there, McLaughlin went to Bristol, where he started his own branch along the waterfront. If The Bible Speaks sounds familiar, that's because it made headlines in the late 80s, when an heiress by the name of Elizabeth Dovey Dennis sued to recover millions of dollars she gave to the church in Lenox. She claimed she was unduly influenced by Pastor Stevens. The court agreed. Meanwhile, McLaughlin broke his ties with The Bible Speaks and aligned himself with a non-denominational church in Houston, Texas. He still has the ordination certificate hanging in his church today. From Bristol, he moved to Warren in 1986 to a church called East Bay Christian Center. Dave Therian was an assistant pastor there and remembers McLaughlin's style of preaching.
Very charismatic. He had a lot of authority in his voice. People commented on the ability that he had to teach, but unfortunately there was a bit of control there.
Some of that control, according to Therian, involved McLaughlin's sexual advances toward female parishioners.
I probably don't know the extent of it. The ones that I do know, 8 to 10, 8 to 12 maybe, that I could say. Different degrees of immorality. And many of them were women that came for marital counseling. So they were at their weakness. They were there because they were having problems with their husbands.
See, when when Bob made advances towards me, I thought I was the only one he had tried that on. And I was very guilty, feeling, oh my God, I'm making this man fall.
Julie Almeida was a parishioner of McLaughlin's at East Bay. Her ex-husband, Ray, is still a deacon at Grace Bible Church.
He demeaned Ray a lot more than he demeaned me because, well, he was Ray's friend. He was always trying to get with me.
Therian says after the allegations came to light, McLaughlin was removed from the pulpit in 1991. A former church member who asked that his face not be shown remembers the day when it was announced McLaughlin was leaving.
It was stated plainly the day that I was there. I'll never forget, it was a Wednesday night, and it was gross sexual conduct was the term used.
Therian says McLaughlin admitted he had a problem and promised to get help. Therian says the church in turn agreed to continue paying his salary, and within a year he would come back. But Therian says that did not happen.
He immediately, I guess, began to contact church members and turned it around and told them that it was more of a church conspiracy to take the church from him.
But through a written statement from his lawyer, McLaughlin tells a different story. He says he voluntarily resigned from the church because he felt he no longer had the confidence of the majority of the deacons. McLaughlin also categorically and emphatically denies he ever engaged in sexual misconduct, calling them baseless allegations. After East Bay, this is where McLaughlin ended up, following a few brief stops in Providence and Westport, Massachusetts. Grace Bible Church in Rehoboth opened its doors in '92. Jeff Tippins was a member at Grace and says McLaughlin talked about the allegations at East Bay.
I was taught that it was a conspiracy, that because he was God's man, the world was out to get him, and that gave him validity.
And Tippins says absolute control over those who became what he calls McLaughlin's inner circle.
He sat at the head of the table there, and he's like, I trust you guys, because if there was something on the sidewalk, and I said to pick it up and eat it, you guys would. That's how much he had us like that. We would do anything he asked us to do.
The motivating and driving factors are power and money.
Larry Nichols is a nationally known expert in religion and cults. He studied McLaughlin and his teachings and talked with former members of his church and says,
if you look at the criteria for what constitutes a cult, Bob McLaughlin does fit the bill.
That criteria? A charismatic leader who controls the congregation with
no accountability whatsoever to anybody but God. Anybody that dares to question him runs the danger, the risk of being, castigated from the group, disfellowshipped from the group.
The church responded once again in writing by calling the allegation ridiculous and saying the expert in this instance has never spoken with any present members of the church or the pastor, but nonetheless believes himself qualified to give an opinion. But those who have left say they're concerned for those who remain and might have their faith twisted as well.
I just can't believe he can get so many people to be so weak and to keep falling into the same mess.
As long as that guy's in business, he's always going to have something to sell and someone to sell it to.
He sets himself up as your pastor, as your friend. So you just go, it's like a lamb being led to slaughter.